you need to understand that growth and failure are correlated with each other. You don't need 700 people believing in you. You need one person to believe in you and give you an opportunity.
All right, welcome back to the Full Out Real Estate Agent. I'm your host, Mark Ferris. Today we have a treat for you guys. We have a real rock star, a super athlete. We have Mary Ann Gillespie, and we have her as the CEO of Red Apple Coaching. She's coached over 900 agents. She's built 230 realtors into millionaires. She's featured on Forbes, and she's also a author of an amazing book called Resilient Woman of Real Estate. Mary Ann, thanks for jumping on the call here.
Thanks, Mark. I'm so excited for today.
Yeah, and we'll go by Meg. I got permission before to call you Meg here. And so your story it's inspirational. And if we can go back to the very beginning there, I know there was there's a tragedy that happened in your family. And maybe you could take us through that early struggle that you had going through that, so the listeners can get some better perspective of what your background is and why you are such a successful, we'll say, persistent athlete and coach as well moving forward. You can share.
Sure. I think, you know what, one of the things I've learned, so when I was younger, my family suddenly, I lost them. And, the story's quite tragic, but what ended up happening was it rendered me homeless. And so when I was homeless, that was it lasted a good year. And I think a lot of people take for granted, their households, their family, a lot of the things that happen to them in this world. And one of the things that happened to me being homeless is that I realized you have two ways to look at things. You can either make it and you can really look and say, okay, how do I get out of this? Or you can become a victim, as we talked about earlier. And I think, as tragic as that was, and I don't want to gloss over it, but I learned so many things from that experience. And it was a lot of things that have happened in that moment. Equally, looking at how my life went. I mean, I used to be 300 pounds and now I'm a world championship Ironman athlete. And so there are so many things that I went through in my life that have accumulated. But I would say one of the things that I always learn is that no matter how successful I am, I would give anything to have my family back, just for a day. And I think when you look at, I was sitting at a table, literally sitting at a table, and I'll never forget my mom having, a coffee, and literally 4 hours later, that was it. My whole world was rocked and changed. And then 30 days later, I was living in the streets. So at the end of the day, it was like, you can always, I guess, not look at it as a victim, but look at it as I had no choice. In that circumstance, I had no choice. I had to survive. So I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about the situation. And I think one of the things I bring to my coaching clients that I think that has just brought me into is that you don't need 700 people believing in you. You need one person to believe in you and give you an opportunity. But also that everything that you've gone through in the moment can seem terrible. How you perceive it and how you change it is what makes it amazing later.
Meg, how old were you when this tragedy happened?
I was just a teenager. I was just old enough to just old enough to not go into the system, but young enough to not have a credit card.
Wow.
I didn't have a credit card. I had nothing. I couldn't even, there was nothing. I had nothing. I had no credit, zero credit whatsoever. And that just was, it was bad.
And what city were you based out of?
I'm originally from Montreal, and this is
Montreal.
Ottawa. Yeah.
Okay, so you got a teenager, your parents just passed, and you're going through this, and you're out in the street. So this is some really good context, and it's such a great we'll say underdog story. And there's something so interesting about an underdog story, how you're really rooting for them to come through, and you just love seeing them win through it versus using that as the reason why they're not successful. You actually use it. And we talked a little bit about this, but the victor, you created a victor story out of it, and he used it as a launching pad to, thrive and grow. When you were down, we'll say actually living on the streets, what was it that actually, was there a decision? Was there somebody that helped you? What allowed you to get out of the streets and then, starting to take that next step when you were at your all-time low?
Yeah, so I think for me, my old time, and it's like this, it is the scariest place that you can be. And so when the one person that helped me was I showered every day at the gym. And so it was the YMCA, which is a local public facility. And so I would shower there. And it was the front desk reception. Her name was Erin, who literally noticed after a long time, had put some things together. And she just said to me one day, all she said is, she says, hey, you know what? I don't know, but guess what? I have a bachelor apartment. It's totally small and whatever the case is. But if you need a place to stay, I just want to kind of let you know. And I said, yes, right away. I was like, absolutely. I'm like, I would really appreciate that. And so what that happened is when she did that, it allowed me to sort of, first of all, I needed it. It was really amazing and super kind, but it allowed me to open up, get the assistance that I needed, and I was able to get into a social housing apartment at that time, and she had helped do that, and I ended up getting an apartment that was subsidized by the government, and that it was $300 a month, which was fine. I could definitely afford that, and because it was subsidized, I didn't need to have anything other than a reason to actually be there, which I very much did, and that's what changed everything.
Yeah, you had somebody step out and they stuck their hand out and they helped you through that period. But the interesting thing that would lead to that, though, is that she probably noticed that you were showing up, that you were an honorable person, and so you just kept showing up at the gym, and you took action first, and she saw that versus you just kind of not doing anything. So I think that was like an initial thing that you had internally. You just kept going into the gym. You took advantage of that, and she saw that tenacity perhaps in you, and maybe that glow. But it still takes somebody to step out that she did. Now, so that's really great, and I love hearing the story. Not the tragedy, but the story of you overcoming such a, because we through the day to day, Meg, we go through a lot of challenges as real estate agents, right? And I think a lot of times, most of the times anyways, especially when you hear a story like this, you're going through like this challenge that you think it's the end of the world, but hearing a story like that, it's like, okay, that's not that bad. And so what's really interesting is I found that the bigger you scale up, the bigger you grow, you have bigger challenges and bigger problems. And so all of a sudden, like the problems that you go through on a day-to-day, just like a kid, when you take their candy away, they think it's the end of the world. Like you grow and develop as a person. So I think context is really important when, realtors, if you're going through a challenge right now, Meg and her story, what she went through and using it as fuel. What do you think, Meg, it was that you had internally that helped you get through and to be able to make that decision that, what, I'm not going to let this define me. Maybe you didn't even have that conversation, but do you think that you had something in you that could be maybe developed or grown, or do you think that was just, you were born with it and you didn't even make a decision on that to be able to get through that early struggle?
That is nobody's asked me that. I think that that's a great question. My family immigrated from Poland. And so coming from an immigrant family like that, like I got to see, and they had passed away. So my grandparents had been in Montreal first. And so I got to see, and they had passed away when I was under, I think, 7 or 8 years old at the time. And so they were in Montreal, and we didn't grow up with much. We grew up very poor. And so I would wear used clothes. I don't ever recall. You can see pictures. I mean, I had clothes with patches all over them and things like that. So I think I was just always brought up as the kind of like that, I would see that there was two sides. Like we were living one way and everybody else was living a different way. So kind of like looking and going, wow, like, those kids have really, fancy cars and their parents aren't making them take the bus, or they don't have patches on their clothes and I'm wearing boy clothes sometimes and like things like that. So I would see though that ultimately that physical stuff like that was really irrelevant. It doesn't really matter what you have. It matters like the influences in your life. And so I was always influenced by, love. I was always influenced by kindness in my family. Yeah. I was influenced by so many different things that were beautiful that I got to experience. True immigrant families as well. You see a survival within them that they had to go through and share the stories of where they came from. So I knew all about Auschwitz and everything that they all had to go through. And that alone was like, I think ingrained in me to be like, okay, I'm not a victim ever, is you're going to go through hard times.
Yeah.
So I didn't come from a privileged family. So I think being exposed to that really helped in my circumstances.
Well, Meg, I have some really good context for what you just said there, because my wife Joanna, she's actually Polish, and she came over when she was 6.
No way.
Fled communism, and so and that's something that's very consistent with immigrants that come with nothing. They're not getting a handout, and they definitely didn't get a handout when they came. And he left basically a whole business over there for what they could actually run, and had to start from scratch. So it's interesting, as a kid, you see that, and you're really ingrained. So if you're listening out there and maybe you weren't brought up in that, you just look at other people and follow the life stories of highly successful people that came with nothing. And I think that listening to stories like Meg, I think that's like inspirational moving forward. All right. So I want to move on, but still stay on the topic of mindset, Meg. So mindset is, I've found to be one of the most relevant reasons why agents are either successful or failures. What do you think is the main determinant for a successful agent when it comes to mindset that differentiates a successful agent versus maybe a failure agent? Is there something about their mindset that's just different?
Oh gosh, yeah. I would say it's very obvious when you're in the coaching industry, but you can tell that. So I have a neuroscience background as well, and you have to understand how the brain actually does work. And one of the most important things about mindset is you have to accept failure. You need to understand that growth and failure are correlated with each other, and that failure is something that you should, don't be afraid. So you get stuck in this comfort zone all the time. I speak about this, and it's like you're in a comfort zone because you're so scared that you're going to fail. But it's that's what you should run to. You should run to it and say, if I fail, that means I tried. And so a mindset that is very, very, very strong around acceptance of failure is one of the key factors that I see, because in coaching and in real estate, especially the last year or two, it's been so different than it has in 13 plus years that you're going to be loaded with growth and failure at the same time. So the people who are really succeeding at a high level in the real estate world have accepted that, okay, it's a different year, different time, different circumstances we've never been through. I'm okay with failing a little bit and then learning and moving on. So it's that resiliency of failing, loving the failure, and getting back up and saying, okay, I learned from it, let's go. And that's what the brain loves. The brain is okay with failing, but it loves learning too. So it's kind of hand in hand.
Yeah, well said. Run to failure. That's a good quote there. Run to failure, because that's the biggest indication that you're on the right journey, on the right path to success.
Well, it's like you said, right? If you model all these really top producers, including yourself, if you ask a question, it would be like, oh, well, Mark, what's your biggest failure? You'd be like, well, I got to think about how many I've had. That's usually the answer I get.
It's so true. And, one of the things I found about failure is that, as soon as you take action and you say you might fail, you get real live data and feedback, and you learn that at a deeper level. If you you get stung on something, for example, you're negotiating an offer and you forget to add in a fridge, or there's a fridge in the garage and you forget to add that in, and the client told you in the walkthrough and you just forgot. Well, the reality is you go to close and the agent says, or the client says to you, it should have been included, and you're like, well, it wasn't in the as a good agent, you own that, right?
Absolutely.
And so the best learning, you somewhat failed, so to speak. I think there's an opportunity to make it up, and you buy the fridge. Now, if you buy the fridge, do you think that you're gonna learn from the next one? You're gonna learn that lesson better if it cost you something,
yep,
versus listening to you and I, Meg, and say, make sure that you include the fridge in the garage. You got to go through and mentally walk through. We could say that, but it doesn't stick the same way as if they had to fork out $1,000.
Exactly. It's not a failure. It's a lesson, and it's great. You know what? Why get stuck on it? You learn, you move on, and we always have this saying in my team. We're we look around and we're no matter how big the problem is, we're is everybody still alive? Yes. Okay. Then we're good. Let's keep going, right? If nobody passed away from what we did, we're okay, and knock on wood, we're good. Nothing is so dramatic that you can't learn from it.
Yeah, that's so good. I found for me another thing that really helped is when I'm going through any challenge, it may seem big in my world, but like if I have context of somebody else, so like think of Abraham Lincoln, like as a president, what he had to go through from the amount of weight that guy would have had to carry to be able to abolish slavery, and the amount of pushback and threats and all the rest of it. Like context is really good when I found, okay, what would other people that have done bigger things, if they look at my problem, would they think that it's a big deal? And generally the answer is like, actually, it's kind of small potatoes, right?
It really is. It's
Yeah.
like, it really is. I think that's also like when you come back, I sit in front of groups a lot and I'm like, look, unless you lose, like I did, the family and the house, that's truly rock bottom. That is rock bottom. If you have no family and no house, like no roof over your head and no family, that's rock bottom. Everything else is manageable.
Yeah. Keep moving forward. So good. All right, Meg. So a agent comes, and he or she hires you. What advice do you generally give in kind of those the first few coaching sessions that you're like, okay, we got to make sure we nail this down? What would be like maybe a couple things that you make sure to be able to nail with any new client that you onboard?
I think the newest thing that, like, for me, what I'm always really clear on is, don't chase the dollar. I'm like, don't chase the dollar. What we're seeing right now, the biggest trend in the industry is relationship-based over transactional-based. So I just explained to everybody that, don't come to me and chase a transaction. We'll get there. There's no question. We have the success rate to prove it. But I really, really, really believe transactional-based businesses is 110% what the consumers, it's what they want right now. But it's also where that we're going, and that's never going to disappear. And it's become so obvious in the past year that that's what consumers want, and it didn't pre-exist. Actually, for the last 10-13 years it was transactional, so you could get away with that. So I always say to people when they coach with me, I'm like, I'm going to teach you and coach you at the very beginning some great scripts and some great ways to show you what it means to really reach out to somebody in your own circle. Start within, and like stop chasing, this or that. I said you have the ability to build a beautiful business, but you need to understand that people want to hear from you, what it's like to be a relationship-based agent first and foremost. And every single time we do that, within 30 days, they're in GCI. So it's like, and then they get the epiphany, and then I go, okay, now you understand. People matter, people care, people are very important what they're going through. So now that we've gotten there, it's like, now let's go. But also you need, just to be fair, you need a business plan. You need a direction on where you're going. Like the book, Good to Great. You can't get on a bus and not actually know where you're going. So we work on those two at the exact same time.
Yeah, well said. So what would you say would be like, if you look at your top agents that you have over the years, you've trained hundreds and hundreds of them, the ones that are doing the relationship-based transaction versus the transactional, what would you say the ones that are doing it the best, the relational side of it? What are some things, like some actionable things that agents that are listening to this today can say, okay, I can implement right away? What are those top agents doing that you've identified so that our listeners can apply it?
Yeah, perfect. What I find is that first of all, relationship-based agents always net more income. I will just say that all day long. They all day long, it's at least 20% more net that they net. So I would say very, very important. I think when you're looking at agents, if they want to improve it a little bit, I say, first of all, you have to check in on the phone quarterly. Stop hiding behind technology. Technology is definitely amazing. But if you hide behind technology, you are missing this entire segment, right? Like a great story I'll give you is when I was 300 pounds, I decided I want to become an Ironman World Championship athlete, right? I was like, I'm doing it. What, 300 pounds? Not a lot of people are going to believe you. But I had 2 personal trainers on my social media site. They never reached out, ever. And you could see I was 300 pounds. I mean, it's kind of obvious that I was. And they never reached out. And then I went and I hired 5 different people, 5 different coaches. And they got me to where I needed to be. We worked really hard. And then when we got there, these 2 trainers sent me very nasty messages. And it was just very, very much about how I didn't support them and blah, 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 blah. And I just simply said, I said, here's the thing. You saw that I was 300 pounds, right? And they're like, yeah. And I said, and did you ever reach out and just say, hey, like, this is what we do. Like, what we do. How can we help? They're like, no. I said, okay, that's the difference between, caring and just a phone call or even a reach out, instead of me just looking at where you are. And a lot of agents today, to understand what a relationship-based agent truly is it's not assuming that just because you have great social content or you have, success stories or you're hitting targets, a relationship-based realtor is somebody who's going to pick up a phone and understand that just checking in, especially at this time of the year and other times of the years, just checking in 4 times a year on the phone will literally double your business. I mean, you can build the most beautiful business by just being relationship based and just caring. And instead of using, for example, social media as a playground for yourself, are you really watching the people? Like I told you, I saw you running. I watched that. But like if you were my client, I would be like, hey, Mark, you know what? Great run. Your wife killing it. Amazing. Like that's relationship based, is actually paying more attention to what others are doing and just commenting and just showing that you care. And it doesn't require much. But relationship based agents are knowing that if you're hearing in the news that economic times are tough for people, have you actually picked up a phone and checked in on everybody, including your friends and family? So it's just showing that you're caring, and that alone is such a small effort. And I could show you 1,000 messages on any given day that it's like when you show people and you pick up a phone and you care about them and you make that effort, people are like, whoa, like I got a phone call? That's pretty impressive. And I think like I get blown away every time somebody who's really super busy that I know is busy, they pick up a phone, they call me. I'm like, that's amazing. And it feels good. And you've heard that saying, right? If you make people feel good, they're just going to support you all day long. Like all day long. They're going to be like, oh yeah, I'll just like pour into you. So it's like, it's a beautiful, beautiful experience to be more relationship based than transactional. And there's nothing wrong. Transactional means, doesn't mean necessarily that you don't care about the people you're in business with. It just means that you're not reaching out to them and going deeper. You're not actually reaching out saying, hey, are you okay? How are things going? What can I do? How can I help?
It's so well said. And I think a lot of agents, they know that to be true. They know that. They've heard that before. Sometimes you just need reminders, which is why it's so important to get, a really strong coach. We call this collecting dots on our team. We call it collecting dots and connecting the dots.
Oh, I like that.
And so it's like you got to collect the information and be able to tie them together with action. So that's where it's like you identify something on social perhaps, and, you reach out to them. It's finding... we'll call it finding solutions for people. Like your example that you gave with, you were overweight and none of the trainers reached out to you and offered you a solution. An example of that is just reaching out to your clients and like, is there an opportunity to pull some equity and buy an investment property? Because like now is like everything's at a 20-30% discount. Like, come on, like that's a great opportunity, right? But like collecting dots and connecting them, I found is really important. Now, the other thing of this, why it's so much genius what you said, because a lot of times that, the agents that are listening out there, that it's just clients will go with the path of least resistance. So if you're there and they're thinking about buying or selling, or you make a good suggestion, a lot of times they'll just go with you if they kind of like you. But unless you're reaching out to them, like Meg, I'm sure if one of those trainers reached out to you and say, hey, listen, I have this really great program, and I see this, and here's how you could get there, and here's some results of some other people, and I'm just or at least check in, and even if you say no, if they keep on adding value, eventually they're going to open the door, and it's like, oh, they're going to give them an opportunity, right? So I think that being there gives them the path of least resistance as well, which is going to get you more business.
I couldn't agree more. And I think like just to even add to that is you have to look at some of the stats too, is I think there's a maybe a mindset that every, buying and selling homes is always situations that are pleasant. And it's like, unfortunately, 1 in 3 people are divorcing, and, 35% of people who default on their mortgages is actually because of critical illnesses, that like stage 4 cancers and terminal illnesses. And it's like, if you have to understand, like our people right now, 1.8 million people are unemployed with houses. There's some really cool stats that you can look at and say, wait a second, there's more than 50% of households that are actually deciding whether they buy or sell because of really serious stuff that's gone on. And if you're not reaching out to them, it's very uncomfortable. Just like it was for me at 300 pounds. I didn't feel like reaching out to them because I was embarrassed. I was shameful. I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And maybe they don't want to work with me. So you have to remember, if you don't do that, then it's easier to go to a stranger.
Yeah, that's so well said. And you know, Meg, it's interesting that example you gave. You had a trainer reach out and like upset with you.
Oh yeah.
So you didn't reach out to them. I see that a lot with real estate agents. They have a sphere, somebody within their sphere, and it's the craziest thing because they won't get a listing, or there was a friend that listed with somebody else. They walk into an open house and they didn't use the friend. And then the crazy thing is that the agent friend that didn't get the business, they call their friend up and they ream them out and they get mad at them.
Yes.
And the crazy thing is that they will 100% never use them again.
Ever.
And so with us, if there's a client that calls us and say, hey, listen, I'm going with somebody else, we wish them all the best. We're extremely, respectful. You know what? We're here for you. The door is open. And you would be shocked and awed on how many callbacks we get that it just didn't go that well. But if we would have reamed them out on the phone, we would have just reamed them out. Then 100%, we're not getting that business ever. So I think it's funny that people in general, and I guess it's across the industry. It's not just for real estate agents. It's continuing to know that the person you reamed out knows 200 people. So if you ream them out, they're telling all their 200 people. So not only did you lose that business, you lost any potential future referrals as well. So I was
taught a long time ago not to do that. I was like, a long time ago in real estate, it's like my first coach taught me that. It was just like, you know what? They're like, you know what? I always say it because I was doing a great Zoom session the other day on open houses, and somebody said, well, I don't want to do this, or I don't want to do that. And I said, you're so concerned about everything. And I said, and at the end of the day, I'm like, you can't get upset if people don't use you because you don't reach out to them, or you lose somebody to another agent. I said, your self-reflection moment is to say, I should have done better. What did I do? And learn from it and move on and keep the relationship going. 110%. The orphan agent count is huge.
I like that, orphan agent.
Oh yeah, the orphan agent. Yeah.
Well, it goes back to that ownership mindset. I think the agents that do well, they take 100% responsibility and give zero excuses of everything that happens in their world. Right. And so if something like that comes up, you're right. They look internally like, what could I have done better? Right. Versus like blaming people. Yeah. So good, Meg. So this is really helpful. So just to recap, so 4 times, would you recommend like a phone call to clients 4 times a year? Is that what
every
you
quarter?
Recommend? Yeah.
Every quarter, if you just pick up the phone and you let your clients know that that's the expectation, so you hold yourself accountable. But that's one of the first things I do with every client. I'm like, we're going to put a 4 call plan into your system, and we're going to start that today. And I'm like, right now, your check-in, it should be, talking about what are your future plans, like what a great conversation to have, whether it's the end of a year or start of a year. If you're doing that, then, your call plans should be, hey, it's just Marianne checking in with you. I want to make sure, what's you up to this year? What are your plans? I don't want to miss you on a follow-up. And then set the expectation. You've got nothing going on. Perfect. I'm going to call you in a few months. In 3 months, I'm going to check in with you. And I just want to make sure you're okay. So if you answer, that's great. If you don't, I'm still going to check in with you. And it's such a beautiful, clients love it. The amount of referrals and the questions, it's high level service. It's high level, I'm Disney. I have a background with Disney leadership. So I took all my leadership training with Disney and John Maxwell. And so I've got the 2 of them who like Disney and John Maxwell coming at me going, you got to pour into people and lead them and love them. But then you have Disney where it's like, are you making sure that every client is having a Disney experience with you? Is it truly the happiest real estate team in the industry? If it is, that's a heck of a good thing. And all you have to do is make calls. Call them every quarter.
Got it. And so it's as simple as just reaching out to them and saying, how are you doing? What are your plans for this year? Because you get that, a lot of real estate agents have that as a major concern. It's like, listen, I just spoke to them a few months ago. Like, what will I say when I reach out to them? Like, I don't want to be like annoying. Can you give any sort of advice to the agent that has that objection or story in their mind right now?
Yeah. So to the agents, I think the biggest objection I always get is people say either they just spoke to them, or they say, I don't want to be annoying, or they say, they know I'm in real estate, or the biggest one is I haven't talked to them in 3 to 5 years and I'm very uncomfortable. And what I always just say is this, okay, if you're moving from transaction to relationship based, then understand that a dentist, for example, a dentist doesn't call you and check in all the time. A dentist you call when you need them. And that's how they saw you in real estate. Okay, so get over it. If you haven't talked to them in 3 to 5 years, they're not upset. They just look at you as transactional because you haven't reached out to them. They didn't need you. You didn't need them. So now just tell them you've changed. And I think the biggest thing about the relationship based as well is, you give them a call, and a great script is so nice to just say, hey, like there's so many changes that happen in 23, 24, and what's to come. It's normal to just say, hey, it's Marianne. 2025 is upon us. I wanted to reach out to you, checking in and making sure that I missed nothing on my follow-ups this year. So I want to book everybody in. So I wanted to just see, do you guys need any help with anything real estate related this year? And that's all you have to do. And you can leave it as a voicemail, or you can ask them. And if they say no, then you get into the, okay, that's awesome. And do you have any questions? Like, everything is changing in the real estate industry right now. Is there anything that I can help you with, refer you somebody? No, everything's like great. But it's like, it's so easy to do. And what we see, I'll tell you the conversion, it's a 1 in 10 conversion. Every 10 people you speak to is actually needing something. You have billions of dollars of renewals happening.
Yeah, that's really helpful to know that conversion rate, because you figure out what your 1 in 10 conversations, your hourly rate is very high at that. You figure out what that each transaction is. Okay. So when you reach out and they don't pick up, would you just leave a voicemail? Would you text them? Like, how would you leave off? Say you got 100 clients in your database. You reach out, nobody answers. Do you leave a message, or like, how do you?
Absolutely. I leave a message, and the thing that you always have to remember, by the way, is that a lot of people also say, well, I have a client appreciation event, or I send them Christmas cards or holiday cards or whatever the case is. That's not the same. Okay. This is a, we call this a relationship based call. So it's contribution, and contribution, we have no expectations from it whatsoever. Yeah. We're just contributing to their world to make it easier. And so we basically leave a message to some. I'd be like, hey, Mark, it's Marianne. I just want to check in with you. 2025 is upon us. I'm leaving you a quick message to say, look, I want to make sure if you have any questions or need anything in 2025, that I know exactly when that's going to happen. So I'm going to send you a quick text in about 48 hours or so. I'll check in with you then, and just think about it and let me know if there's something that you need. Okay. And then I will send a text. I put it in my FUB 48 hours later, check with Mark, and I'll send you a text, and I'll be like, yo, how's it going? Just checking in.
So it's a 1-2 punch, and then would you move on after that if they don't get back to you? Yeah.
100%.
So the beauty of this is how simple it is. And I think that's where a lot of agents get caught up, is with complexity. It's like, I need to go do all this strategic. I got to keep, do this. And the reality is they get paralyzed. It's like, Meg, that's how these line trainers, they train these lions, is they hold up a stool with a 4-legged stool, and they hold that up to the lion, and the lion doesn't know what to attack, so he gets docile and he gets tame, right? Because he got so many things coming at them. The beauty with Meg's suggestion here is that it's super simple, and that it's simple enough that you're going to do it, and the act of doing it is going to get you the 1 in 10. I mean, that's wonderful. Great result.
Works. Yeah, I'm not even kidding you. It just works. Like, between Christmas and New Year's, like, we always have a call blitz that we get all of our clients to do from the 27th to the 30th. We're like, we know, but it's the highest call ratio time period is December 27th to 30th, and everybody's in a good mood. So if you're really scared, don't wait till December to do it, but if you're really scared, the 27th to the 30th is the highest answer rate, highest happiness rate, highest everything, and you can clean house. And we always just say, it's a beautiful time to do it. And the results speak for themselves. I know my stuff. There's no doubt this works really good. And every quarter, just check in, and that's all you have to do. And sometimes you'll have clients, I have a great relationship with my clients. So sometimes I'll leave messages, and I'll be like, if I don't hear from them and it's the second quarter and I still haven't heard from them, I'll say something funny. I'll be like, listen, I'm not sure, but I feel like I should do a SOS and like a stop in. So I'm thinking, like, let me know when you're cooking steak. I'm good with coming over. I love steak. I'm into it. So let me know, and I'll leave something funny. Like, I have a good relationship, and they'll usually text back and be like, oh, we're such terrible people. I'm sorry. We love you. Everything's great. Yeah, so it's good.
That's really good. You know, it's if you don't answer, I'm coming over. They're like, oh, geez, I got to respond to this one. Megan, she's persistent,
Oh, yeah.
right?
They love it. They love it.
Yeah.
But most of them want me to come over. Like I have more dinner
Yeah.
invites than I've ever had in my life, and I'm like, but it's just kind of like it goes back to just caring. I mean, you've got to take a moment, take a beat, and I think that's the important thing is technology. We hide from it so much. From the transactional versus relationship and technology, we hide from it, and it makes us like people don't think we care as much as we do. So just like try it and then give it a shot. And we just say just rip the Band-Aid off and do it as a team or do it with a bunch of agents and have fun with it and just figure it out.
That's a good tip as well. Like do it with a team member, do it with somebody within your office, do it together. You got to go with buddy there. Like I know Joanna, she's like, you be my go with, not me, but one of her friends if we're out on dinner or whatever. She's like, I know that's a thing. You can have a go with calling buddy, right? Yep. And so that was a really good tip as well, calling between Christmas and New Year's, because you nailed it in regards to how people are feeling great. And the other thing, I mean, they're thinking about what they're going to do for the year for their New Year's resolution. So if you're top of mind, you just maybe delivered some value to them. You connected well with them. That's a really good tip for the listeners out there. Well
awesome.
Done. All right. Well, so relationship-based business. Is there anything else rather than reaching out once a quarter that the top agents that you've seen do really well to we'll just say add some more fuel on the fire of the relationship building game?
Absolutely. I think one of the things you have to remember is that relationship-based agents are highly knowledgeable. But they're hyper local. And that means like nobody's really concerned. Like if you're in Montreal, there's not a little concern of what the Ottawa market's doing, or even the Ontario market for that example. So hyper local market knowledge is one of the biggest trends in the industry. So a lot of agents, like you need to know right now, like the number one thing about relationship based is how much knowledge are you bringing to the table? There's 5 government programs for first time home buyers right now. There's big changes coming, with, amortization periods and whatnot. Do you know everything about your market right now? Do you know, for example, in Ottawa, they met their housing starts. So that means pricing is not going to jump very high in Ottawa because they're on track with housing starts. They're one of the only cities in Canada. So you look at that and you go, all right, that's hyper local knowledge, knowing about all the developers starting and being the first to say, hey, we're going to do interviews with developers. So, instead of having content that's always related to my life is perfect and, the highlight reel of how great everything is are you demonstrating that you're the most hyper local knowledgeable agent? And if you can do that, then people feel this relationship. And then I'd say the third thing that is the biggest trend right now is unfortunately consumers, because it's been such a kind of a whirlwind the last 3 to 5 years with all the changes from COVID and everything, is the trust factor is very low with consumers right now. Is that they don't know and they're not getting that hyperlocal knowledge. So they're looking around going, maybe I won't do anything. I don't know. So video client testimonials is the biggest trend that we've been talking about for we're getting all of our clients to do them. We're like, guys, start to do videos of your clients sharing, hey, I just did a deal with Mark and I'm just going to let you know, best, smoothest experience ever because this is what they did. That is so big on building relationships right now. They don't want to see the written portion. They don't want to just see you brag about what you do. They want to see a video that says, yeah, this was amazing. And people connect to that. And it's just so powerful for relationship building that we're seeing the business that's coming in from that is ridiculous. So I would say those 3 areas those 3 things would probably, they'll do wonders for you. Hyperlocal knowledge, do the quarterly check-ins, but also really show your videos because you'll get referral business too. If you send it out to your database and you're like, hey, here's our 3 favorite client testimonial videos this month, and you have 3 different types of consumers, you send it out to your database, and what's going to happen is your database is going to be like, oh, I have a friend who's thinking of maybe send it out and be like, look, this is a great team. This is our team that we did business with. People love it. And it's like on fire, fire.
Yeah, full out, right? So that's well said. It's interesting, the market expert side of it. Yes, putting in the time and understanding your local market, that's really good advice. what I found to be like super important is that when you meet somebody for the first time, they're making a decision whether they like you within like the first few seconds. So there's something that, whether you're a fan of him or not, the Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, I was at a conference and he was one of the speakers. And one of the things he said, like within like the first few seconds, you got to establish three things very quickly. One, what you had recommended, you got to like that you're a market expert, like you are the expert. Two is that you're sharp or sharp as a tack. And three is you're enthusiastic. And so that's one of the things, going back to the market expert, it's like not waiting until, the third meeting to let them know and to inform them that you're a market expert by communicating value, what's going on that maybe they didn't know about, but like doing that up front as soon as possible so that when they're making a decision, is this somebody that I want to do business with? You've established that authority off the bat rather than waiting too long, if that makes sense.
Well, it makes total sense. And it's also like we incorporate that into coaching as well, because I'm like, for myself, my job is to be the coaching expert on with the consumers. Like we have 21 ISAs that call nonstop to consumers. I want to know everything of what the consumers are thinking about in the market areas that my clients are in. So every day they reach out, they have consumer calls. I just want them to get the data. Are you thinking of moving? What's 2025? What did the 50-point rate drop do for you? I want to know what my clients, consumers in their respective areas, and then I know everything about their areas too. Like that's my job, is to be, so I practice what I preach in that. And the relationships I have are bigger and greater with our clients because they see and they trust. And they go, she knows more about the market than we do. And she's researching it constantly. So it allows me to bring that to them. But it also, at the same token, I mean, it's the trust and it's the relationships, is like, that somebody is vested into what's important to you. And that's really a big takeaway.
Was there any other takeaways before we segue away from the relationship based business? Is there any other kind of last like key nuggets that are like, oh, this would be so good to add when it comes down to that before we segue away from the...
Yeah, I would say everybody comes to me and says they don't know many people. Okay, so I would challenge you on this. Open your cell phone. Most of you have iPhones. I think I'm the only one with a Samsung. But anyway,
oh, boo.
I know, right? I know. Everybody makes fun of me. I'm like, it's got a good camera. But anyway, so long story short, I always say to people, when you don't think you know a lot of people, open your iPhone, scroll to the bottom of contacts, whatever that number is there, just don't get attached to your actual CRM. Pick up a phone, do your ABCs, and reach out and see what the magic is. Your cell phone is worth probably, and that's what you were talking about, hourly wage. The average realtor in Canada, I would say, has we've established it's about $350,000 of business sitting in their cell phone at any given time. So I always say, just if you really want to see what a relationship-based business is like, rip the Band-Aid off, go down, start with ABC, and just doesn't matter. I called somebody literally a few weeks ago. I didn't know who she was. It was a first name, and I was like, what is this? So I called her. She answered, and I was like, hey, I'm like, Shannon, and she's like, yeah, and she's like, Marianne, I'm like, yeah, I'm like, how do I know you? And she's like, I have no idea. She's like, and I'm like, we're in each other's phones, we have no clue. So we just started dying of laughter. She's like, you just called me randomly? I'm like, yeah, totally. And so we got to talking, and we did a CMA on her house, and we're listing it, and I was like, it was just hilarious, because she's like, we still have no idea how we made it in each other's phones. But it was kind of hilarious. I was like, well, I said to her, why did you answer? She said, I don't know. I was like, who is this? So we just had a laugh about it. So I think, your cell phone is absolutely magical. So if you're going into it and you're saying, I have no relationships, I don't know enough people, pick it up, do the job.
That's well said. That's such a great tip. And we all have contacts in our cell phones. So it's hard to give any excuses after getting that advice. So well said.
Yeah.
So you've built 230 realtors into Millionaires. Yep. What would you give, if you're going to give any sort of investing advice of the realtors? You're going to start making money. You're listening to this podcast. You're taking advice, what Meg is saying here. You're implementing it. You're going to earn more income. Like that's just the natural byproduct. That's going to happen. So what advice would you give the listeners out there as they start generating more income? They have some savings. What advice would you give the listeners out there to be able to not only like protect, but then to grow their investments moving forward?
So I love investing. I mean, I'm pretty much, when you have no safety net, like I didn't. So when you have no safety net, you learn the importance of investing in real estate for sure. So I like to invest in real estate, period. So for me, this is the wave happening right now. I have a little bit of like anxiety going, okay, I got to get more properties here. So what I like to do is I like to look at RCa has great reports on this, and they have amazing reports on where the forecasts are going to be. So I like to just have fun, and I like to set a goal where I would suggest almost every realtor have 5 investment properties if they want to secure a good future for themselves. So I'm like, so try to really reinvest into at least 1 a year if possible. And do that for 5 years. When you have 5, I feel like that's a good place for you to start to go, I'm doing a good job. But don't set it at 1. Don't wait for it. Really look at, how can I do this now? You're in real estate. You're selling houses every day. You don't always have to buy in your own city either. I feel like that's, talk to some people who are very successful, interview them on their investments, and make some, go with your comfort zone, but also understand that it's like 5, we're in commission only careers. You have to take care of that. And so 5 investment properties is my magic number that we always tell our clients. We're like, get 5, start off 1 a year. It's in our goals. It's always in our plans. And then if you can't afford the city you're in because it's too expensive, go to RCa, look at that, and sort of say, okay, RCa's got the forecasted reports of where the prices are going to go. And they've been fairly accurate, those ones. So invest in an area that has a lower price point, but, possibly a higher growth level.
Yeah. I like your advice that you gave in regards to, like, if your area, maybe your city that you're living in isn't the best place to invest, call like a top producer in another area and get advice and counsel. That's actually, Meg, what forced me to really look outside our area.
Wow.
And why we buy actually down in the Southeast in Florida and South Carolina and some of these markets is like we're buying these larger multifamily deals down there. Like we're seeing them at 25-30% discounts. They cash flow. There's no rent control down there. But I like your advice of real estate is the place to be, especially as a real estate agent. Just because your market maybe isn't conducive for an investment doesn't mean that stops the real estate investment cycle of you doubling down on that. It's so interesting that in a market that drops, it's not sexy to buy real estate anymore, but that's when you should be buying everything when it doesn't feel good, right?
I go to developers, and I'm like, my smartest was going to developers, and I'll never forget. Madame came to me, and they were like, right before COVID, they're like, we have a developer because of the relationships I have with them. I'm always like, I'm like that little piranha at the developers, and I'm like, if you've got anybody falling through on sales and you take off their down payment stuff, like, you better call me. And so I've got a list right now to go through this weekend. But Madame had called me and said, they had an investor fall through on 3 units. And 3 garden units. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll take them, $260 a pop. I was like, they're all worth a fortune right now. And I'm like, so, you can kind of like be creative too. Like, developers have fall throughs right now. So are you actually going there and saying, hey, I would love a smoking deal. If you have anybody falling through, I'm ready to go. And you would be shocked at some of the amazing stuff that you can find too. So it's incredible. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well said, Meg. And that goes back to like the storytelling that we tell ourselves, right? There's no good deals out there. Well, if you say that, that'll be true for you. If there's lots of great deals out there, it's like, okay, that'll be true for you too. You mean just maybe you got to be more creative today than you've been in the past, right? But your stories tend to end up being the truth, whatever the story you decide to tell yourself. So.
And you have a housing crisis in Canada and the United States. So both countries have a housing crisis. So it's like, it's not getting solved anytime soon. So you have to know that I would say almost anything is really a secure investment as long as it's within your financial means. It's actually an amazing, I can't even imagine people not investing in real estate at this point.
Yeah. It's the biggest regret I hear from most agents is that, I wish I would have bought more real estate, right? I sold so much all through the years. I wish I would have bought more. And it's like, okay, well, why don't you buy more today? They're like, it's too expensive. It's like, trust me, 10 years ago, you thought it was too expensive 10 years ago. And yes, it is more expensive today. That's truthful. But the question is, in 10 years from now, we're going to be looking back at today and say, like that was expensive or that was cheap. And probably it was the latter. I think is what kind of
Oh,
history.
I agree. I agree. I would be curious, what to see. I'm always asking people, what do you think of the condo market? What do you think? I mean, like,
Yeah.
why it's not that bad. I'm like, you can get some smoking deals in the condo market.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
the really good conversation there, Meg. I could keep talking to you for many, many hours about real estate investing, real estate,
Right.
selling real estate. The relationship side of the real estate agent business, which is so powerful. Some of the wisdom and nuggets that you shared. But we are coming to a part where I need to transition to the next part of this, the lightning round here. If you ready for rapid fire questions?
I'm rapid. Let's do this. Rapid fire.
All right, cool. All right. So, what is your favorite book that's made the biggest impact in your life?
Being it that I'm Polish and being it where my family history is, I would say The Happiest Man on Earth is my favorite book. I read it once a year. And I love reading that book. I think it's just a really good reminder of something we talked on, which is just, listen, you know what, whatever your circumstances are, it's your control, how you choose to see things and how you choose to see the world. It's all in your hands. And that book is so easy and remarkable. And every year I remind myself when I start the year, it's not going to be easy, but remember, you know what, it's up to you.
That, I just want to underline, you gave a really good tip. Like you said it without directly saying it, is that you read it every year. What I want to recommend to the listeners out there is that if there's a really great book that made a big impact, reread it and go deep rather than just, it's better to read 5 great books 5 times than to read 25 different books. If you just go deep on the thing. And so I love that, to read that book that made the biggest impact on a yearly basis. It reminds me back when Dale Carnegie wrote the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. Right at the beginning, he says, this book is not meant to be read once. You got to keep reading it to keep it relevant, keep it up in you, right? And so, just want to give that suggestion or recommendation to the listeners. If there's a really great book, maybe it's the book that Meg just recommended. Read it, reread it, and get it so it becomes part of your DNA. That's good. All right. So 3 words to describe you, that your closest people that know you, how would they describe you in 3 words?
I would say mentally tough. That's for sure. Super energetic, and I would say inspirational.
Yeah. No, I agree with those.
Yeah.
With those.
I would say those are the 3. Those are the 3 I hear all the time.
Yeah. Well,
go ahead and that.
All right. So last question here is, what advice? So there's a new agent, or maybe it's a struggling agent. So it could be either or. So they're struggling, as many real estate agents are out there. The last few years have been tough. Or maybe it's just a new agent getting into the business. What advice would you give them to help get their business off to a very strong start?
I think the advice that I would give them is the mental toughness that's required. And I think what you always have to remember is that the way that the brain works, and this is a little analytical, but my neuroscience background will definitely explain it. And your brain doesn't know the difference between a truth and a lie. So if you've entered a journey on something, or you have a goal in your head, it doesn't know that it's true or false. It knows that it's giving you that idea or that goal or that intuition to move forward. It's giving it to you because it's taken your entire life up until this point to say, you got what it takes to do this. Okay, so don't U-turn. Do not U-turn. You've got what it takes. When I was 300 pounds, I knew at 300 pounds that I could do an Ironman. And when I did the Ironman, I knew I could get to the world championship level. I built the #1 real estate office in the world for production. It was a Canadian office. When I got it, nobody believed that you could do it. But in my head, I knew I could do it. I may not have known how, but I knew I could. And so when your brain tells you something and you start your real estate career and your brain says, hey, you can do this in real estate, you can do 100,000 or you'll be successful, you have to trust your brain and you have to know that it's not lying to you. It's the voice that says you can do it. And one of the things we learn in Ironman running and athletes is we're not allowed any music. So we know for sure, when you're doing an Ironman, everything that comes to your head is all the worst things about yourself and telling you to quit, telling you to give up, telling you to do everything. So that mental resilience of saying, you know what? you know you got this. Your brain knows you got this because it started the journey with you. The seed was planted, so don't you dare give up. Don't listen to the voices. Don't listen to anything. It's there because it's supposed to be there, because you have all the history in your brain, just like a computer, and it's saying, you got this. There's a reason you're here. So fight really hard for what you want and find the right people to align yourself with and do it, because it's not there for a fake reason. It's there because you can do it. And every time you hit a milestone, it will improve until you can do this. So listen to the positive stuff and listen to where it's taking you. Don't ever give up.
Yeah. Great advice. And I love the suggestion about how when you were going after a goal, it was like you could see it in your own mind before it actually happened, right? You could see that it was possible before it happened. It reminds me of the quote from Will Smith. In my mind, this is the quote from him. In my mind, I've always been an A-list Hollywood star. Y'all just didn't know it yet, right?
I love that quote.
And, such a good kind of
I love it.
Wrap up to what you just said there. So well said, Meg.
Thank you.
So the listeners that are out there, maybe, they want some coaching or just advice, or just, reach out to you in general. What's the best way that our listeners can reach out, connect?
Yeah, I think the easiest way you can is RedAppleCoaching.ca. You'll see my website there and all the stuff that we've got there. And there's lots of opportunities for consults or join any of our programs there. And the only account I'm super active on social media is my Instagram account, which is RedApple_coaching. So you can see that. We're everywhere, but that's the one that I'm actually active on. So absolutely, if you need anything, reach out.
Meg, this is a real pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Mark. Fabulous for having me.
Awesome. And thanks for listening, guys. If you like the show, please share and subscribe as we are building a community of full out agents together here. I love you guys, and keep on going full out.